Welcome back to the deep dive. Okay, if you've been following UK politics lately, you'll know the temperature around immigration policy has really gone critical.
Absolutely
We're
critical.
not just talking about future borders anymore. Now there are proposals that could actually reach back and change the status of people who've, well, already settled here.
Yeah, millions potentially.
The sources we're looking at today really focus on this very contested, quite dramatic policy proposal from Reform UK and the pushback it's getting. Strong pushback.
It is. The urgency is definitely there. So our mission really in this deep dive is to unpack what Reform UK is actually proposing
Right.
and define the specific legal status that's, right at the heart of this argument. Because the political language can obscure the legal reality sometimes.
Definitely.
And then we need to compare the, wildly different approaches and rhetoric we're hearing from the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, and the Home Secretary, Mrs. Mahmood.
Absolutely. And straight away, we hit a point of confusion, I think, for many people. The debate keeps mentioning settled status.
Yeah.
But since the reform plan specifically targets non-EU migrants, isn't the actual legal thing we're talking about indefinite leave to remain, ILR?
That is such a crucial distinction. You've really hit on why this is so politically charged. See, the legal term, the one that gives non-EU migrants permanent residency, is ILR, indefinite leave to remain.
Okay.
Reform seems to be using the phrase settled status more broadly, maybe because it carries that, political weight in recent memory from the Brexit debates, even though technically that often applied more to EU citizens under the settlement scheme.
Right, so it was partly political framing.
Exactly. But the effect they're aiming for targets ILR. That's the status that lets migrants legally settle here long term, without constantly renewing visas. It's the path to permanence, and that's what's being challenged.
Okay, so let's unpack the main pledge first, the really controversial one from Nigel Farage's Reform UK. Their plan is pretty blunt. Scrap settled status for all non-EU migrants.
It's political dynamite, frankly. If they actually did that, it means anyone who currently has ILR would have to reapply, and under much stricter rules.
But hang on, these are people who've already been through the whole legal process, right? They've established lives, they've got ILR status. What's the impact of threatening to just revoke it?
Well, it fundamentally pulls the rug out from under them. It destabilizes everything. ILR is supposed to mean permanence, security. This isn't just about new rules for future arrivals. It's about retroactively changing the deal for people who might have been here for years, working, paying taxes, contributing.
So building lives.
Building lives, exactly. Their homes, jobs, families, future plans. It throws all of that into question. It's an existential threat for many.
Which explains why the reaction from Labour's Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, was so, strong.
Visceral is a good word for it, yes.
He didn't really hold back, did he? What was the specific term he used for the reform policy? It was quite pointed.
He called it racist and immoral, full stop. And he said it needs to be called out for what it is.
Wow. That's about as high stakes as political accusations get in the UK these days.
Absolutely. But what was interesting, I thought, was how quickly Starmer then tried to clarify who he was targeting with that accusation and who he wasn't.
Right, yeah. He drew a very clear line between different groups of migrants.
Exactly. He made it really clear he fully supports removing illegal migrants, people who, as he put it, have no right to be here.
Okay, so that's the border control aspect.
Yes. But he reserved his really fierce opposition for the idea of targeting people who are already here, established and lawfully present. He called them our neighbors. So for Starmer, the policy is immoral because it targets legal residents based on their origin, not their status or actions.
But reading between the lines, it seemed he was also careful, wasn't he? Not to just label every single person voting reform as racist, even while condemning the policy itself.
That felt very strategic, yes. Almost certainly trying to reach out to those voters.
How did he explain that?
He basically said he believes many people backing reform are just deeply frustrated. Frustrated after, quote, 14 years of failure under the Conservatives.
Oh, yeah.
He framed them as people who desperately want change, maybe faster change than they feel they're getting. He even noted some might have voted Labour just a year ago.
So it's a way to condemn the policy, but still try and understand, maybe win back the voters.
Precisely. Condemn the platform, respect the voters' frustration. It's a tricky balancing act.
Well, that accusation of racism obviously didn't go unanswered. Reform UK's head of policy, Zia Youssef, came back directly.
Yes, and this is where the political framing war really heats up. Yusuf's response essentially framed Labour's position as saying the country must pay hundreds of billions for foreign nationals to live off the state forever, or Labour will call you racist.
Okay, so that's quite a counterpunch, shifting it completely away from morality.
Totally. Trying to neutralize the racism charge by reframing the whole thing as purely about fiscal responsibility and welfare access.
So Reform is saying their policy isn't about race, it's about economics.
That's their argument. They state their aim is to make sure only British people can access welfare and that migrants contribute to society. It positions their challenge to ILR as an economic necessity, not a moral failing. If you buy that premise, Starmer's attack looks different.
Okay, now let's bring in the third key voice here, because it adds another layer. The Home Secretary, Ms. Mahmood, she's also looking at tightening ILR rules, but differently.
Yeah, this is a really important pivot in the conversation. Reform wants to scrap the status, force reapplication. Mrs. Mahmood takes a different tack.
She still supports legal migration, though.
Yes, she explicitly affirmed that legal migration, it is a good thing, and that the UK welcomes people who want to come and work, but...
There's always a but.
There's always a but. She said ministers are looking at how ILR could be linked to, quote, the wider contribution you are making to our communities and wider society.
Wider contribution. Wait, what does that mean? If someone already has a job, pays taxes, follows the law, what's this wider bit?
And that is the million-pound question, isn't it? It sounds incredibly subjective.
It does.
The key detail she mentioned is this would be in addition to the job the migrant holds. So your employment isn't enough on its own anymore for ILR.
So, volunteering, being part of local groups, how do you even measure that for a legal status?
Exactly. It implies things like community involvement, maybe civic participation, things beyond just economic input would somehow be assessed. It definitely raises the bar for getting permanent residency, maybe significantly, but crucially, it does it without scrapping the status altogether like Reform wants to.
It feels potentially quite vague and open to interpretation.
Highly open to interpretation and potentially difficult to implement fairly.
Okay, just before we wrap up the main points, let's quickly touch on those other pledges Starmer mentioned about asylum. It sort of provides context, showing he's also trying to look tough on certain aspects of the system.
Yeah, a couple of specific sort of cost-cutting or efficiency measures were flagged up.
First, he talked about ending the use of taxpayer-funded taxis for asylum seekers going to doctor's appointments. He said, as soon as we can.
That's been a recurring criticism, the cost and efficiency of that system, so it's a direct response.
And the second thing was about the hotels used for asylum accommodation.
Right. He said he wants to bring forward the current 2029 deadline for closing all those hotels. He mentioned looking at alternative accommodation.
So, again, focusing on speed and cost management in the asylum system, perhaps to balance his defense of legal residents elsewhere.
Seems likely. Showing action on system efficiency while holding the line on the rights of those with legal status.
Okay, so if we try and pull this all together, synthesize it, what are the main takeaways? It feels like two big competing ideas about the future of residency are clashing here.
I think that's right. The first major tension point is from Reform UK. This radical, frankly, existential challenge to the settled status, the ILR, of people already lawfully resident here, forcing them to reapply under new, tougher rules.
Okay, that's one poll. What's the other?
The other, coming from the government side via Ms. Mahmood, isn't about scrapping ILR, but about making it harder to get or keep by adding this new criterion of community contribution, something that goes beyond just having a job and paying taxes.
It's a debate over who should be here, yes, but also how we define their value or contribution once they are.
Precisely. It's not just about numbers. It's becoming about the definition of belonging and contribution itself.
And for you listening to this, why does it matter? Well, these political arguments aren't abstract. They directly shape the future legal framework for residency.
And they directly impact the lives, the security, the future planning of potentially millions of people who are, part of the fabric of the UK now. NHS staff, tech workers, academics, entrepreneurs, carers, people who consider the UK their home. This debate decides if they can continue to feel secure here.
It feels like defining a kind of second-tier citizenship without actually using the word citizenship.
That's a powerful way to put it.
So, before we finish, we always like to leave you with something to think about, a question that maybe wasn't fully answered today.
And building on Ms. Mahmood's proposal, if indefinite leave to remain is going to be formally linked to this idea of wider contribution, how on earth do you write that into law? How do you define, objectively measure, and fairly judge what counts as contributing to wider society beyond having a job and paying tax? Who decides? Who oversees it? What does community value look like on a government form? That ambiguity, that subjectivity, that feels like the heart of the next big legal and political fight.
A really crucial question to ponder. A fascinating and quite high-stakes deep dive today. Thanks for joining us.